Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio. I am your host, Miss Solaris Blue Raven. I want to thank everyone for tuning in this evening. A special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is David Dunger. And David is a radio show host and an experiencer with a lifetime of abductions and medical procedures, which includes bloodline and family history. His published new book called Visitors, A Lifetime of Experiences can be found on Amazon.com, and his website is www.shinysideout.net. Please welcome David to the show this evening. David, how are you?
I'm doing great, Solaris. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and thank you for being on the show tonight. It's a pleasure to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to hear your voice. And so let's talk about your adventures. I mean, I was looking through your book and reading it, and I'm very impressed with the information that you've presented. It's incredible, and part of it, it seems, as we had discussed off air a little bit, that it seemed very traumatic for you as a child.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's something that I had to put down. I'd been writing it down in a journal for pretty much all of my life, and when I was it goes back as far as I can remember. Even my family has stories about me being abducted from disappearing, I should say. My family's stories mention me disappearing from a first floor flat, which is like an apartment above garages, so I couldn't have climbed down, and then appearing in the neighbor's yard, but it was deadlocked, and it was only a one-bedroom flat. And it made no sense to me as I was hearing my family talk about these stories until later on in my life. So when I began elementary school, for instance, I started to have a lot of fear that I had to deal with personally, and that came out in a number of ways. And one of those was trying to dig a cave in my backyard, in the slope of my backyard. We lived on a heavily sloped block, and my father just saw these feet sticking out of a hole in the backyard, and I'm still digging. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I need to get away from everything. And today, that would be a trip to the brain doctor to find out what was happening. But that was one of those points that is still unspoken in my family. And really good idea of what was going to tell me. They didn't let on. And there's so many events that have occurred, and every one of them today is still like it just happened. It's that fresh.
Wow.
So when I put it all down, it wasn't I put it down and I forgot it. I put it down and I still know that it happened. I still remember it happened. I could write the whole thing again right now. And, I think that the problem that I had up until I realized what was actually happening was similar to, say, a childhood rape victim who's got to hide it all and not tell anyone about it. They feel as though it's their fault. There's a whole bunch of that issues. Now, I'm not a professional in the field, so I can't tell you them all. But one of those things that I discovered once I was able to write it down and tell people about it was that I felt good in my own skin. I was able to look at myself in the mirror and know that I'm telling the truth, even though the reason for all the stuff happening is still unknown.
Right.
So that I found that was the biggest challenge and the biggest change in my life, was actually admitting to myself that it happened. Now, I live in Australia, if you can't already tell my accent, although it's not entirely pronounced. We don't have very many support groups that are available to people as like UFO abductees or alien abduction people. We don't have those things available to us. So with a lack of support groups, I think everyone just suffers these things on their own.
Oh, yeah.
And so what I wanted in a way that was easy to read, sort of like a he said, she said timeline dialogue, and not suppose too many things. I don't want I don't want to put my own opinions on very much of it, as you probably notice. And the key was, if you think that you might be, or you have strange things, or you've always had an interest in UFOs, have a read of it and see if it lines up with the things that you've experienced.
Exactly.
And because it was really written for other abductees and people who were curious, possibly. And that's really the angle that I wrote it all down, was basically just to offload it from myself.
Right, and it is like just like releasing a weight that you've been carrying as a child, to kind of decompress from all of that trauma, from what it sounds like. Now, a lot of people who have experiences with quote-unquote extraterrestrials or contactees, usually there's a positive, but it sounds like you had a negative. Now, what can you relate to our listeners that was negative that you'd like to share?
Well, I suppose firstly, there was no corroboration from, say, my parents that anything was happening. They didn't let on. My teachers didn't let on, and there's an element in that in the book about my diagrams at school, who were, all my friends were drawing, stick figures with a stick figure house and a sun in the corner. Who didn't put a sun in the corner? But I put a UFO in the sky, and I was drawing aliens. And my parents were called to school continually, but they never told me. So the negative for me was having physical things occur to me in a room next door to my parents' room. And they didn't really support it. They didn't say, well, why don't you come and sleep in our room? No, I just go back to your room. It's all good, whatever, right? And here I am suffering in silence. I'm suffering in silence of being taken from my room, having surgical procedures done, and there was nothing and no one I could turn to. The fear that you can't escape them, you can't escape the abduction, like it's going to happen, it doesn't matter where you are, be at a friend's place, don't have to be at your own house, you could be driving, you could be in a plane, it happens anywhere you are when it's your schedule. And that's what I've come to discover, that there's a schedule. It's not entirely random, and it seems as though that there was a gap where I don't even know if there was or not. In my life, there was a gap where there seemed to be a silent period where there wasn't really much going on. Then I didn't know. If there was, I didn't know about it. But it ramped back up again, and it's certainly high now, and it was high when I was really young. There was a high frequency of events. But even to say, that the missing time, the country road driving, all of these things. I mean, you asked what was negative. My thoughts were negative. I didn't know how to handle it all. And, you're young. When I smiled at my school friends, that smile wasn't entirely honest, because I don't know what's happening, and probably nothing was happening to them, and their smile back at me it was genuine. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a hard place. That's why I said it's very reminiscent of someone who's been raped as a child. And I later in life, when I was like 26, I sought a professional, because I woke up one day with an implant, visibly a bump in my arm, and I wanted to go to a skin specialist and examine the bump. And I went, I can't have a bump. Yeah, I just can't have one. And I was very conscious of my body. And there's I'll get to that story about the skin specialist, but a bit later. But the thing was, there's no support groups. There's no one can help you. You seem to be on your own, and it's a frightening experience. It's not a pleasant thing. It's not like, and I say this, they don't knock on the door. They don't send you an email today. There's no written letter. They don't say, we're inviting you to attend a thing. Would you like to come along voluntarily? No, exactly. It just doesn't happen.
And I'm wondering if your parents weren't being abducted also, and just maybe have a memory loss or maybe some screen memories. What do you think about that?
Well, I was about to have a sister, and my sister disappeared. my mother was pregnant, and my the was there no longer. So, and it was sad in our family because, I don't know how far along. I was a bit young, but it was going to happen, and then suddenly I just didn't have one. And my mum wasn't pregnant any longer.
Interesting.
So I don't sort of mention that in the book, but I've got a friend at the moment who had a fetus, and it was taken from her forcefully during an abduction. We've met up past writing my book, and but we were friends. And she said, "Look, I've read your book. I can't believe I've wanted to tell you this for so long, and I don't know why I wanted to tell you." But then she told me about it after reading the book, and she went, "Oh, you know what? It's a relief."
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to know just what kind of relief it is to tell someone else. That's why I think support groups are amazing. But I'm actually glad I sort of didn't go to one, because of I didn't want to invent anything.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted my stories to remain pure and not be influenced by others, stories or anything that might happen to them. And certainly, I didn't want to be contaminated by the fear.
Mm-hmm.
I was having enough of my own problems.
Right.
So, I'd seen on like in TV and documentaries of people in support groups talking about it, and there's a lot of people. I didn't really feel like I associated very well with people who were having really bad experiences, even though I was frightened.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something that I was compelled to go and tell others at the time. I think I had to be ready.
Right. Well, I think you're wise. Yeah.
And when I was ready, I wrote it down, and that's now where we're at.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me because, your perception gets skewed, not necessarily yours, but in groups like that, and there are copycats, and there's this collective that kind of gets all kind of mixed together with personal experiences with things like this. So I think you did the right thing by documenting it solo, and then when you're ready to integrate it or communicate to others, that's fine. But it's not the first time I've heard about children and pregnancies and the disappearances of fetuses and things like that lead me to believe that there could be some ominous or anomaly kind of abduction experiences going on with that. So that's very, very interesting with the extraterrestrials. Now, with your experience, what species are we talking about?
Okay. I've not had any connection with the lizard or reptilian style. I've been shown things by a short, blonde-haired, sort of bowl-cut, blonde-haired gentleman who we would know today as the Nordics. Mm-hmm. I've been shown, and I met the fellow. I wasn't able to speak, and they just spoke to me about what it was and when it was that a certain star alignment was going to occur. And that's sort of written in the book. That the star system that they'd shown me was Aldebaran, one of the largest stars in the sky, and it forms a triangle, an oddly perfect triangle, isosceles triangle. But the other
species are the small greys. Now, I don't remember seeing, when you're lying on a table, it's hard to tell how tall they are. But from what I remember, there are the medium-sized greys at the roadside abduction, and the small greys certainly in my room, in my own bedroom, recently. But outside of that, I tried not to be regressed for too many of the episodes. Seeing one of them in real life, face to face, was good. That was post writing the book, but before then, it was only through regression that it opened up that window. So really, only the two, if you want to classify the greys as being one, whether they're tall, medium, or short.
Well, and they have been. You said you just recently had interaction with them or visiting.
Yes, yeah, and it was a visit, and especially to do with one of my daughters. And look, this one's This one's frightening, I suppose, from the perspective that you're not in control of any of them, but you think you're in control when you have children.
Mm-hmm.
You're in control of their life. Your task is to protect them. Anything they want, they feel whatever emotion. You know what? You feel it too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fortunate enough to live in a two-story house, and while it's not finished and we're pretty skint, we're doing all the work ourselves to finish it off. And I'm downstairs, and we have these huge glass roller doors that slide apart to go onto the deck. And I heard one or both of them, I don't know, moving, and it was about 2:45 a.m. And I heard them rolling, and I went, "Wow, someone's up." So I ran upstairs, and the doors were shut by the time I got there. And I walked around the house. Firstly, I opened them to see if the screen door was shut and locked, and it was, from the inside only.
Mm-hmm.
So no one could get in, and I recognized that someone would have had to have shut them and locked it so they'd be inside the house. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So I did a circuit of the house, and I couldn't find anyone, knowing that someone would have come in for that to have happened. And I heard a whimpering sound, and I followed the sound, and it was one of my daughters up in a fetal position, scrunched up against her bedhead.
Hmm.
And she was crying, but silently. And I only heard the breathing in part. And when I asked her, I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "There were two men in my room." The room's dark. You couldn't have seen them. "Oh, no, they were here. There was two of them." And she was inconsolable. I couldn't prevent her from, I couldn't pull her from her emotion. It was attached to her, and she was in it. Normally, I'd be able to get her to turn on a dime and distract her, but there's no way. And that her reaction to that, her sadness or fear, didn't go away for at least half an hour. She was that frightened.
Wow.
And when she said one was at the head of the bed, one was at the foot of the bed, and I said, "Well, what do they look like?" And she said, "Oh, they're about," she motioned with a hand to about 4 foot tall, big heads, big eyes, spindly bodies, and no clothes on. I said, "But how did you know they were men?" She said, "From their voices." I said, "Oh, they were speaking." She said, "Not out loud, but I could hear them." And I said, "Well, look, don't worry. It was just a dream," and I sort of put her to bed, and that was it. And then next morning, she told her mum, my partner, and she told her, and I went in to tell my partner all about it. I said, "You know what? This is what happened. It happened to her," and she said, "Don't worry, it's fine." When she was groggy, and I had to wake her up. But if at any other time, if I had said, "Look, there's an intruder in the house, there's two men," she would wake up instantly, but she just didn't.
Right.
And that's also consistent with what I've learned about the phenomena. Whereas the partner, one will be told just to smooth it all over. "Don't worry, it's fine."
Right.
And, I think that sort of woke the family up, my family, and specifically my partner. We don't let on to the children, and my children aren't really aware of anything, yeah? We don't openly discuss anything. There's no pictures or anything at all around which can give them ideas. They've only got their kids' books and their kids' movies and things that they see, and none of those include bedside abductions.
Wow.
So as a copy of something she's seen, unlikely. I physically heard it. They make a rumbling sound. I heard that, and it was distinctly only those doors. No other doors make that sound. So it's around about the same schedule, time-wise, that they're used to with me. Maybe it's the family history time. I don't know.
Right.
But certainly, it made me think. It's not the first with my children, but certainly for them to be conscious and awake during it and to be frightened to death. Otherwise, they just wake up normally, and we have bleeding noses at the same time. That's usually one of the hints. Yeah.
My goodness, yeah. What a hot household is what I would like to say. But what about what about surveillance cameras? Have you ever set up any cameras in the house to try to capture some of these images? Or these images? Oh.
I've thought about that, but it would have to be something that someone else put in because I can't know about it.
Okay.
Because remember, your mind is. I've thought about it. I'd really like to do it because for myself, just to be able to see who it is, and maybe it's the same ones. If my mum was still alive, it would be great. So we were bedside up until about an hour away from her passing, and until the doctor shoot us away. But to be honest, it's our family is probably peculiar for that reason that we don't discuss it. I suppose if we lived in America, the personalities might have been different, but I don't know. I just don't know. It's a tough thing because our family doesn't discuss it at all. I can't discuss it.
Wow, that's too bad on a lot of different levels, because I think you would clear out a lot of the debris insofar as what's going on.
What happened?
I am losing contact with David. Not sure what's happening here. Hang on just a second.
You want to hang up and dial him back?
Yeah, let me dial him back. Thank you.
Okay. There
we go.
Hey, he's
back.
It was your humming that did that, Keith. All right. Wow. Okay, David. try not to float away again. Okay?
Harmonic for me to come back online.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
So, I don't know what point, but let's keep rolling.
Okay. Well, we were talking a little bit about your family insofar as how everybody kind of keeps everything hush-hush with these type of experiences, and it's really too bad that they haven't kind of gotten together and compared notes.
Yeah. I found out. I'll take you a bit further back in my family history. And my grandmother when she died, we found out that she was a member of the UFO Society, which surprised us all. We had no clue. And that at one point in her life, when she was living, I think in the 20s, she was living in the mountains on a farm. And she had literally no electricity, no town water. She was completely isolated from, our modern conveniences. And she looked out the kitchen window, which looked out upon their edible garden, and dancing maybe a yard off the ground, varying like half a yard or a foot each way, dancing up and down, left and right, and backwards and forwards throughout the garden, amongst the flowers, and sort of observing, like a butterfly would flutter around, but it was a sphere of light. It was a round ball of white, maybe a foot across, but my grandmother's description of this was that it didn't seem like it had a solid surface. It didn't look physical. It looked more like just light, but it was like a torch being shone at you, but it didn't light up the whole yard. It was in the daytime too, and it was dancing around. She was doing the dishes, and she looked out at this thing dancing around, and she watched it for, she said a couple of minutes, just dancing around. Now, we know that when you look at something, time slows down if it's an anomaly. So it might not have been that long. But the moment she thought to herself, and this was the interesting part, when she thought to herself, wow, look at that. Because you can stare at something in awe without thinking. But the moment she said that to herself, it stopped in its tracks and disappeared around the side of the house, and she couldn't see it. The next thing she knows, it's in the kitchen with her. It came in like the front door or the back, and it eventually left out the other door. But it's come in, didn't collide with any furniture, didn't leave any marks, there's no soot, it's not a burning fire. it wasn't ball lightnings, as her friends at the time told her that she was silly and she shouldn't imagine these things. But it came in and confronted her in the kitchen, and she was plastered up against and as far away from this object in her kitchen as she could be, up against the cupboards and the sink. And she told me of an exchange of information between it and her, where she was shown images and spoken to, like dialogue, and it then left. And she said that experience didn't last very long. It was maybe a minute, maybe. And it left out the back door. And these are things that she was perfectly awake, middle of the day, the only one at home. Her husband and I think the kids were out in the tending to the farm, and she was cooking and doing household duties.
Wow.
And she said to me that it was alive. There was someone in it. In the way that it moved, it was intelligently controlled. But she didn't use those words. She said it moved like it knew what it was doing, as was her words. And she was her family heritage was from Ireland, and she lived in South Africa, and then she moved to Australia, getting married, and she stayed here for the rest of it. She basically, my mum for a couple of years after I was born, and my grandmother basically brought me up while my mum worked, and that was tough. It was, but I think she did pretty good. I'd be proud of her. I'm still proud of her, of her work. I think she'd be proud of me the way I turned out. Mm-hmm. But when I disappeared, this is the frightening part. When I disappeared from her flat, and ended up in the neighbour's backyard, with a 6-foot fence around it. And the neighbour was surprised to see me there. I was less than 2 years old. And the doors are deadlocked, so locked from the inside with a key. And they looked in the apartment, in everything, in the fridge, the washing machine, in all the cupboards, under the bed, and there's nowhere really to hide. And then they heard laughing and stuff that coming from the yard that the balcony looked over. And there I am in the backyard of the neighbouring house playing. Now, there's only two ways that this could occur. Is that I'd levitated there on my own, having crawled up to a window and looked out and thought, "Oh, I should go down there. That'd be fun." Or I was equally impossibly abducted, but returned back there because I wanted to go and play. I don't know. But really this was during the day, right? So it's one of those stories which, in a built-up area with lots of people around, seems, both of them seem unlikely at the time frame. But that's what happened, and for 20, I'm 46 now, but for at least 22 years of my life, that story was banded around unchanged at every Christmas dinner.
Wow!
Remember that time that you ended up in the neighbour's yard? Wasn't that funny? It wasn't, how mysterious was that? It was just, that was funny, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's very interesting, without a doubt. And I'm kind of wondering about that orb of light, or that sphere your relative saw. I'm wondering if that wasn't kind of an ancestor of some kind. That's what comes to mind, insofar as maybe a spirit. But you think it was more of an extraterrestrial? I'm wondering if it was something different, perhaps, or...
Well, she said she didn't know it, but it wanted to communicate. So these are all the weird events, and I've written them all down. They're all in a book. And if you looked at one of the events on its own, you could probably just ignore it or explain it away. But when you have the cluster, and when you put them in a timeline, you go, well, that seems to make sense. Right. There's an evolution of change. Now, this was pre-World War II, and there was still those same sized light things were visible in World War II, dancing around the fighters, around the bombers. And it wasn't until post-World War II that the scenarios changed.
Right, like the Foo Fighters, you mean?
Yeah. So they seem to have changed around that period of time. Now, whether or not the violence was all too much for these peaceful little balls of light or whatever, and they just decided to go somewhere else for a while until we got our act. I don't know. See, once again, these are the suppositions that I'm not making in the book, right? I'm just putting them down. But now, in hindsight, when I look at it, I go, oh, you know, that's possible, or this is possible. And I don't, because I don't want to sway it. I don't want to sway it because I don't want to say, oh, you know, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be wrong in the way that I'm thinking towards it. They're just matter of fact things that have happened, and these are first-hand accounts from people, from myself, from my kids, from it goes deeper. It goes deeper than this. So I think it's time for the skin specialist story.
Oh yeah.
All right. So I woke up. I woke up to the feeling that happened that night, during the night. I'm remembering visions and a dream state of being shown this star cluster. I've never seen it before, by the Nordic-looking guy in what looked like a felt, or like a felt cape. Very strange. And he said, this thing's going to look like it turns, and when it does, that's the sign. That's when it's all happening, and you'll know what to do. It's like, and I'm not in my own house. I've been taken somewhere else, and it was a group of probably 13 or 14 people. I don't recall exactly. I think I wrote down 13, but of 13 people wrapped in blankets, sipping what looked like mugs of very thin soup. And they're saying, I'm being told that it's one of us. Whatever it is one of us. We don't know which one it is. One of you will be chosen or something, right? And like, I'll be honest, I don't dream. I don't dream anything. When I dream, it's the future. Everything I've dreamt is the future. I've seen plane crashes and large things that affect lives of people, but on mass scales. For instance, 6 months before the Concorde crashed, I saw the Concorde crash in exactly the same fashion that it crashed.
That's interesting.
I have precognition, but it only happens in the early hours before I wake up, and that's if there's anything coming. But normally, say for instance, if it's the Concorde, I was every person on board every single night for 6 months, and I'd leave a house and get in a cab. I would, hop on public transport, or I'd drive there myself, or I could be male or female in the precognition. I'd either wave goodbye to my husband or my wife, and kiss the kids, whoever they were. I was these people in advance of seeing it, who all got on the Concorde and it crashed. So I remember one time in the 70s or something, there was a high amount of people predicting stuff, and there used to be a hotline you could ring, and if you saw it, you could identify the flight number or the airline company that you could log in and register your vision. But there doesn't seem to be any of that anymore.
No.
So, so that's pretty tough, yeah. And I was thinking, so here I am. I've woken up, and there's the Nordic guy, and what do I do? I've got to remember what he says. So I write it down, and I can still see it to this day, the same vision, yeah. And I'm thinking, I'll jump in the shower. So I jump in the shower, and I'm washing my hair, and I feel this like silver dollar sized piece of no hair behind my right ear, just up about the same height as your ear, but behind it, yeah, where there's a thick clump of hair, but there's none. And I look in the bottom of the shower, there's none there. And I finish my shower and I go to the bed, and there's no hair there either. Very strange. So, okay, well, I'm missing hair. And then I'm drying myself, and there's a lump under my left arm. I'll check this out. and it's not squeezable. It's hard, but it's right at the surface, but it's underneath the surface. And it wasn't there yesterday, but it's there today. And there's no way that it could be pushed in. There's no scarring or anything. It doesn't make sense. How could it be there? So I get myself off to the doctor, and my local GP, general practitioner, looks at me and says, "I don't know, Dave, you're weird. What can I say?" And he goes, he said it a lot, right? And I had the same doctor for like 30 years. And I've seen him recently too. He's lovely fellow. And he wrote me to go to a skin specialist because it was outside of his specialty, yeah? And I go to this guy, and he's really old. And the story is sort of comical because it's my view from my perspective how the whole thing transpired. But I get there, and this guy's almost going to retire this afternoon. He's that old. Wow. He's seen everything, and he's laughing with me because I don't know. You can probably tell I can talk. Yeah. So I'm chatting with him, right? And it's really funny. And he says, "Oh, you won't believe this lady that came in the other day." She goes, "I can't tell you her name or anything, but she had this thing," and we're laughing because it was funny, and he's making it funny. He's a genuinely nice guy. And I said, "Look, have a look at my head." And he goes, "Wow." And he put up against and he's looking at it. And he said, "There are any hair follicles." And it was about between being referred to this special. I said, "Well, I mean, there was. It's like palm hand. There's no follicles at all." And there was supposed to be, and there was right there. That's the reason why we're here today. And he goes, "Well, I can make it grow." He punctured it like 50 times with steroids to induce hair growth, and that was terribly successful. And you can't tell today. And then I said, "Look, before we wind it up, Doc," I said, "on the back of my arm, I got this lump." And he felt it, and he's squeezing it. "Oh, it's hurting." And he said, "Geez, it's really weird. Why would it be square?" His comment to himself, right? He goes, "Look, never mind. It might be an ingrown hair or something. We'll just cut you open and we'll have a look. We'll just get a biopsy of this lump." And it's probably, less than half an inch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hope I'm not breaking up.
A bit, a little sketchy. Or are you on Wi-Fi?
No, I'm not. I'm mobile. Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
Mm.
So it's not ruining the experience. Is it terrible?
No, you're okay.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
All right. So not a mobile phone. Sorry. So anyway, he's cutting me, and his phone rings. And he walks over to the phone. He makes me hold this wadding over the cut, and there's blood coming out. I've got a suction device that I'm supposed to be holding on the part of my arm I can't even see. And he walks over, and he picks the phone up, and he swivels on his heel and looks me directly in the eye while he's receiving this call. He's not concerned about my arm. He's not looking to see whether checking my arm that I'm doing the right thing, holding the suction thing in the right place. Is there blood dripping off my elbow? No. Responding to the person talking at the other end. And they say, he says, sorry, because I can't hear what they're saying. He says, right, okay, and he hangs the phone up. He walks straight over to me, and he gets the sutures out. I think sutures, yeah, and he starts stitching me up.
Mm-hmm.
So he's stitching me up. And I said, "Well, aren't you going to take a biopsy or something?" And he goes, "You'll be right." And I go, "What do you mean you'll be right?" He goes, "No, I'm just going to stitch you back up. You're fine. Don't worry about it." I said, "What about the lump? Don't worry about it." And he sort of pats me on my way and sends me home. And I don't understand. Like a moment ago, he was joking and laughing, and now he's ultra serious, fearing that he can't touch anything. I felt the scalpel hit something hard in there.
Well, that's interesting.
It hit something hard, and the lump is there today. Now, 15 years later, it's still there.
Did an X-ray?
I have smudges on X-rays.
I had some next day, which I asked the radiologist, like, what's that? They said, thumbprint. I held it. I said, well, I take another one because I'm really interested in seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that. I asked them, and let's have another X-ray, and there's a thumbprint in the same spot. And I said, what's the story with the thumbprint again? Oh, don't worry about it. Later on, one of my friends who became a radiologist, I asked them if it was at all possible that they're familiar with having cover-ups that they find in X-rays. And they said, yeah, it happens all. I said, but wouldn't they be interested in these anomalies that you're covering up? And I said, yeah, but you know what? We'll just cover them up. You know they are.
David, looks like we're having some real bad technical issues right now because of the connection signal. Is there any way you can change locations for better signal?
Do that as we speak.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is just end up if we get to a really good spot, yeah?
It's a heads up.
It seems it's getting better.
Okay. Right now I can hear you well, but I'm not the one
Yeah.
getting into that, so.
No, I get you.
Okay. Well, it's very fascinating all in all. And so far as the implants go, I mean, do you think that's more of a government implantation or an extraterrestrial type thing?
You know, this question's come up quite a bit, and I really like to know myself what it is, but there hasn't been any evidence that's led me in any direction. At the moment, I've only got the information based on how on what I've seen from the regression. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
better now, David.
Yeah. So I'm pulling over.
Okay.
So what I've discovered is sorry, not discovered. What I've thought about was, is it that if you are abducted by aliens, for instance, does the military become interested in you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the question that I'm raising, because
right.
I think so.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you on that one. And from my own research and investigations, I know that's correct, because if you're a contactee or an abductee, you're usually tracked and targeted by covert intelligence. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if that's the case, how are they disguising themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And how is it must be tracking me by something, presumably an implant of some kind. Maybe that was the one that was in my arm.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think the aliens can ring somebody on a phone.
No, they use your supercomputer mind for that one.
Yeah. So that's the only reason why I think that would be the case.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it couldn't be any other way, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't cause you do you feel any pain in that area at all?
Only if I squeeze it.
Mm-hmm.
It's already at the surface and it's causing a visible lump on the outside of my skin. But there's been another one that's been in the same arm now. And that one came overnight, but it's at the front. And that one sort of hurts. When one time I put a neodymium magnet near it and moved it quickly past it. And I could see a bright light out my left peripheral, out of my eye.
Mm-hmm.
And like a sparkle when I did that. And I think if it's anything, they're able to see what I see and hear what I hear, I suspect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of technology they really have. I thought it might just be a geolocation device.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did that, I just thought I'll just play with them a bit.
Right.
Well,
it sounds like you definitely have a tracking device of some kind.
And, people ask me all the time, would you like to, why don't you just have it taken out?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, they'll just put another one in, for starters. Plus, I think I'd like them to know where I am.
That's interesting.
If there's something that's going to happen, whatever happens, if it's only there to track me through my life, fine. I'll leave them, who cares? if it's something that's because there's going to be some kind of event that they want to know where I am, maybe they can pick me up. I don't know. I just don't know. Well, I'd really want it in.
Mm-hmm. What about your children? Do they have implants?
No, not that I can find. The first one that I remember being put in was inside my nasal sinuses, like deep inside my head, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That was the one that I remember when I was really, really young. And that was alien, for sure. But the other ones in my arm, I can't say that they are or not.
Right.
One was associated with what seemed to be an abduction experience. And the other one just appeared. I don't even know how. It's not an ingrown hair, and it's a lump, and it resembles the other one, but it was sort of painful. So I think they vary. I don't have them anywhere else. They're not in my toes or in my legs or anything like that. And there was a story that came out recently about a fellow that was abducted. He went off into the hills to look after his cows, and he was on a quad bike, and he went missing, and he was later found, a lot later found dead, but with a crushed upper left arm. And it was the witness testimony from two fishermen on the other side of the mountain in the river who said they saw a UFO come and a light come and pick this guy up.
Wow.
And they didn't know whether these things were connected until the missing persons, they looked it up themselves and found the missing person. And so that was really interesting, that the upper left arm, that's in fact where my implants are. And I still don't know. It still doesn't answer the question of they're military or alien. I don't know.
Right. It almost sounds like a tracking device for military. But do you come from a military family?
Oh, my grandfather was in both wars, but there's no one doing active service. Mm-hmm. My father was also in the military, but there's no. Yeah, I don't think there was anyone in any special ops or special programs or anything, or not there letting me know.
Right.
Yeah.
This is really fascinating, though, nonetheless. And when you were first contacted, how old were you?
Well, the first, between 5 and 7 was the first conscious event. But I've been missing and then come back to the house again, where with frantic parents looking for me, and I'm just there. Mm-hmm. That was when I was very young, but they called me like the escape artist. Like it doesn't matter where I was, I'd end up somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It was funny. This is really funny. When I did physics in California at Canyon, and I sort of knew it. When I did algebra, it just made sense, and that translated really easily to momentum and physics, in Einstein's physics world. Even I can't remember the name of it now. I think my mind's gone blank. But it translates really well, and I just sort of knew it. And my physics teacher even commented, "How do you know? Like, how do you just know? And why does it all make sense to you?" And I said, "I don't know. Mm-hmm. It just does." And he was Joel Levine, tremendous fellow. He's now head of in a university, head of the physics department. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Relativity was the word I was looking for before. So the whole thing seemed to make sense. But every time he told me that light is a constant, I said, "It isn't." And he goes, "But I'm the teacher and I'm telling you, this is what we know so far." And I'm going, "Well, I'm telling you, it isn't. For some reason, I know that it isn't a constant. Mm-hmm. Light travels at different speeds." And he said, "Oh, the Big Bang." I go, "No, not quite. Close. I don't know what the answer is, but it's not that."
That's very interesting. It's like you had a download or received some kind of a download from your experience.
Yeah, they talk about that now. And when I was talking to Mary Rodwell, she said that there's the star children.
Right, yeah.
Who are abducted and given like 6-week, penetration lesson on everything universal. And then you're put back on Earth again and it's there. And, whenever you need it, that information will always be recallable.
Exactly. Yeah.
And my daughter seemed to exhibit the same things when she hit 7. She automatically knew all this information too. And I thought that was extraordinary. And it was watching her grow up gave me an insight to my parents watching me grow up through the same experiences.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's almost like a parallel effect, parallel bleed through almost. It's really neat. Does she draw too? Does she sketch things?
Yeah, she does. She did a painting. We put her in art class, and she had a lot of the conceptual art from human history. But the one that got me was her drawing a sad face. It was so. I don't think sad covers it. I think despair. Despair is probably the saddest word we have. And she drew a face that was so full of despair that it wasn't funny. We couldn't put it on the wall.
Oh.
You couldn't look at it. And that was like her subconscious going through the tribulations, of that. And subsequently, she drew from one of her overnight experiences, she drew a person, oddly enough, with large eyes and a large head and a spindly body.
That's interesting. Have you had her contact, or Mary contact her?
Not directly, no,
Okay.
but Mary and I, we talk about it, and
Okay.
Mary gives me tremendous advice from a professional standpoint of how I should relate to my daughter.
That's great.
Because of, you can't just say, you can't sit them down and go, what, aliens are real and you're being abducted. Good luck with that, right? Try dealing with that. And that's just too much. So, yeah, just being supportive and not broaching, don't get too close to that kind of data with her, and just support her with whatever she's doing and thinking. And you know what? That's working a treat.
Excellent.
And that's what my parents did with me, and I never knew it.
That's very interesting. And what about regression? Any type of regression being done for you?
For me, I'd probably like to go again and see. I want to see what happened on the plane, because I know what happened on the plane from my point of view, but there's an hour gap, and that's a whole discussion for after the
Right. And
hour.
so you don't know what happened in that whole hour, huh?
No. Just to know everyone's going to hold on for this story coming up in the next hour. To be honest, it was an hour flight and it took 2 hours.
Interesting.
For everybody, not just me.
Wow. Did you talk to the other people after you got off the plane about it?
No, not at all. No one spoke a word.
Yeah, we'll have to have more information on that one. That's really interesting, and a lot of people are receiving missing time. You're not the first person I've heard that's gone through this kind of thing. So, and it seems to me now, do you think that it's increased insofar as UFO activity, missing time, abductions, and what about Australia? I mean, is that a hot spot now?
There's a hot spot in the Northern Territory up the top of our island, continent. There's a hot spot there for witnessing lights in the sky, dancing and moving around, and the typical sort of Area 51 style of aeronautics. But there's been some cases, where, way back in the 70s where, a schoolyard was visited by a landing disc and people got out. Reminiscent of the same thing that happened in that African school, if whoever's into the genre would understand what I mean. And
I remember that,
yeah, and all the kids at the same time said the same story as those African kids, and I think it means that they're trying to contact the children. I think the children are the open mind people, and the adults are, for the most part, pretty closed. But I think we've changed. Society's changed a lot in that 45 years, since then, and I think we're more accepting, as long as the military doesn't get involved in it. If it happened. If it happened at a major sporting event or something, I think that would be awesome.
Well, it seems to me, there's definitely a lot happening now. Part of that reminds me of how psychic people are. Once their psychic vision and multidimensional sight opens up, then they're able to see a lot more of these anomalies, UFOs, spirits, whatever you want to call them, with that vision. Now, how much of that is really based on people awakening on a higher level of consciousness versus a real scenario where we're experiencing just visitation? What's your take on that?
Yeah. I still think we have a ways to go. But, just as long as people... I think what do they say? Like, the recent figures were like 51 and 57% of people believe that aliens exist now. And I think that, with the government being able to
give us drips and drabs of information like other planets exist. The church saying that life just must exist elsewhere now. Rather, big change. It's a 180-degree change from them. Yeah,
right.
I think with all those things, even going as far as to say that intelligent design is a way that people who are zealous, religious fanatics, I have to say, within their silo, it's normal behavior for them to think only of the Bible. For those people that intelligent design makes sense, that someone was able to do it, that we were designed. I think that's one of those stepping stones to stopping those people from, requiring Xanax after an alien ship lands.
Right.
I think it's one of those things. I think it makes sense.
Oh, I agree. And it looks like we might be heading for a break here real quick, but we will be back for sure. And where can everybody get your book? Amazon.com and where else?
Yeah, well, just go to Amazon.com. You can find it in both hardcover and in ebook style.
Excellent. And I recommend people take a good look at it, especially anybody who's had any experience with UFOs or extraterrestrials.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we'll be right back here. Stay tuned, everybody, with David Dunger. Welcome back, everybody, to Hyperspace. I'm Solaris Blue Raven, and I'm here with my special guest, David Dunger, and we're discussing a lot of interesting information about missing time, UFOs, and extraterrestrial experiences. And David, I won't have you do one of your impersonations of Christopher Walken, but...
Why? Why not?
I love it. It's so funny.
It's Chris.
It's great, Chris. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing good. It's crazy. The thing... It's very funny. I love doing Christopher Walken.
Oh, you're good at it. You're excellent. You make me laugh. It's great. And what is, for people who want to tune into your radio show, what's the name of your show?
Oh, yeah, why not? Well, my show is called Shiny Side Out, and it's referring to the correct folding of one's tinfoil hat. We're not poking fun at the genre at all. We believe that's probably the best way that people can remember it. And Shiny Side Out is, we talk about a whole bunch of things. We're really trying to just be informative, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go to shinysideout.net, and all the other information is there.
Excellent. Yes, indeed. And I'd like to cover the missing time, if you're up for it, insofar as your experience on the plane. Yeah, if we can go into detail about that for a lot of people, because like I've said before, there are so many who have had missing time. So let's hear your story.
Yeah, well, there was two events of missing time. One was in a car driving like 1,000 kilometers at night time. So I like to drive overnight. The passengers get to sleep throughout, and when they wake up, they're in a new destination with no real, no exhaustion. But unfortunately, at that time, I was ahead of time on my planned itinerary. It was looking great, but unfortunately, when along the way, suddenly the car lights just went out, and there was no street lights where I was driving, for instance. The sun was at the point where on its way up to sunrise, that the silhouettes of the trees beside the road between me and where the sun would rise, the sky was becoming from black to that royal blue. It was really nice, providing black on blue sky silhouettes of the trees. And there wasn't enough light to see anything. There was no moon. It was moonless. And suddenly on this, I'm going slightly downhill, and with the headlights on high beam, I was able to see that it sort of kinked off to the right-hand side, a couple of 100 meters away from me. And suddenly the engine went off, and the stereo went off, and it was loud. I had the windows down just to keep awake. It was nice. But suddenly, I was wrestling with stopping the car. I know I've only got like one application of the brakes, otherwise it's going to become useless. I remember that the road went straight for a while, and I knew that I had to stop, but I just didn't want to stop. I was so afraid of actually stopping. There's no one there. It's the middle of nowhere. And yet I knew I had to stop because of this kink in the road. Otherwise, I'd careen off the road into the trees, and no one, you just wouldn't be found because it's hilly. So I slightly pulled the car to a stop with a single application of the brakes on the gravel side, and I got out and I raised the bonnet. And the next thing, I nearly did Chris Walken. The next thing, I'm standing next to the driver's door. There was a gap. I had my head under the bonnet going, well, there's nothing wrong. All the terminals are on. The car shouldn't have stopped even if the battery terminal came off, but it didn't. It was there, fixed firmly on. And, so next thing I'm standing next to the driver's door, and the interior light came on, and the stereo is blaring because the key was still in. I didn't even turn the key. I didn't turn the key off. It was still there in the on position. And the car didn't start up or anything, not like in Hollywood, because you got to start it manually. And the lights are on, and it's like, what? And my partner at the time, not my current one, she became my wife and divorced me pretty quick, probably because things were happening, and she just couldn't handle it. And she had her feet up on the dash, and she was fast asleep. And she goes, "Is something wrong?" And I said, "I just don't know." That was my reply. I don't know. And I got in the car and we drove, and we were only just by the skin of our teeth on time, which was bizarre because we were hours ahead when we left, and I was keeping to the schedule and we were on time, and we just had this big gap of missing time. And my clock in my car at the time was analog, and so when it was not supplied any power, it didn't move. And it showed like an hour and a half to nearly 2 hours, hour and 45-minute difference in the time when we reached our destination. And I just know something happened then. So that was the point in which I wanted to be regressed, and I was regressed to show that I was sort of ushered to the side of the road, and there were grey aliens there, and the whole business happened. So I thought it was very, very interesting indeed.
Oh yeah.
But the plane episode was significant because it involved other people who were awake. So it's still hard for me to believe that it happened, because an hour-long flight, you go up in the air, you hit your maximum altitude, and then it's just a cruise downhill, pretty much. They just tip it down, and you're in a glide path, basically, to land. That's all it is. And yet we reached a point, I'm looking out the window, and we reached this point where the ground was no longer moving underneath us at all. It wasn't moving
and I was watching like the one of those, like radio tower with a beacon light on top flashing, and that's what sort of alerted me to it. We weren't circling it because I could still sort of see. It wasn't dark enough yet to be dusk, but I could see it, and we weren't moving. And it's like, why aren't we moving? And then I look up, and just off the plane's wing is a silver disc, and I kid you not, right? I was over the moon excited. Yay! Look, finally a silver disc. Cool, that's awesome. And I looked to turn to my right, with the sitting next to me was like a 10-year-old, and on the other side of her was her mother, who was probably mid-30s, a couple of years older than me at the time, and she's fussing over her daughter. And I looked down, and her daughter's covered in red spots from head to toe. She wasn't before. And we'd not spoken. Like I said before, I'm talkative, so it was a surprise to find someone who I could sit next to, but wasn't talkative. And suddenly she's fussing over her daughter, and then I sort of look up. I stick my head up above the seat level, and there's no flight crew. None. And this is the time when they should be feeding us or cleaning up after us, doing the trolley service. Mm-hmm. And there's no one. And everyone's just there's no one doing anything. It looks quiet, like it's a nighttime trip overseas, yeah? And I was it's only like a 727, and I was in the front section of the plane. We don't have like first class on domestic flights. And the cabin door opened, and in walked what looked like to me like the pilot and co-pilot, dressed so similarly. And I'm not an expert. I couldn't tell whether they were the pilot or co-pilot. But they've walked in, and as they're walking down the aisle, he's grabbing the tops. And this is what I noticed about people, right? He's grabbing the tops of the chairs with looks like white knuckles. He's holding on. But we weren't turbulent, and he could have just casually walked down the plane, he's a veteran flyer. But no, he's clutching them at the top, and he doesn't look steady on his feet. He looks like he's all over the place. And I would describe him as someone who didn't know who he was. If you went to ask them something, they wouldn't be able to reply to you. Right. He looked like he was in his own world. And I was like, what? Oh, and all this imagination in my head. It's like, oh, I can fly a plane. Don't worry. I've flown planes, in simulators, and I've landed a plane at the old Hong Kong Kai Tak airport where you have to fly between the buildings and do a sharp right. Awesome. In the buildings, right? You do a sharp right-hand turn, and I landed a 747 in a simulator. And that was great. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, I can do that. Cool. Finally, I hope no one else can fly a plane better than me, right? Because I'll get chosen. I'll miss out my moment of glory, right? And he looks up at me. He looks at me in the eyes, and suddenly he just it looks like he's been rebuilt. He looks at me, I look at him, suddenly he stands upright, he lets go of the seats, swivels on his heels, and goes back into the cockpit and shuts the door, and he's gone. I look back outside, because this all took a while, right? So I look back outside, and the disc is gone. Then I look down at the spots on the girl's legs, gone. Mm. And the mother turns to me. I look her in the eye, like okay, I'm going in reverse order of all the things that happened, right? I look down at her legs, then I look at the mum, and the mum's looking at me, and I look at her in the eyes, and I go, and I'm not about to say, wow, wasn't that strange, right? And she said, this is the only word she said. She said, "You're not what I'd expected." Hmm. And then she turns and faces forward, and she doesn't utter another word. Then the pilot announces over the radio, over the thing, so we can all hear it through the cabin. He announces that we're going to be roughly an hour late. He doesn't say that. He says, we're slotted in to land at blah, blah, blah at this time, and that's it. It's like, and he announces the temperature and the wind at the destination. It's like, what? But we were going to land an hour earlier than that. Possible. So that's what I want to be regressed to. I want to see what happened. I want to fill that time, because we were an hour late in our flight. Doesn't make sense. The dots on the girl's legs, the flying disc out the wing. What were, this is my question, which I want answered. I'll never be able to know unless one day one of those pilots hears what I'm saying
and says, you know what, I was that guy, I was that pilot, and I was looking out the windows, and you should see what was in front of us. Never mind what was off the wing, you should see what was in front of us, because that was something else. What caused him to lose himself?
Right.
And wander out of the cockpit on duty, you know?
Disorientation is what it sounds like.
Where were the flight crew? It's not like a 747, they can duck upstairs or whatever. So where were they? We don't know. There was no one around. So I think they were all observing something. I think they all saw it. I think they were called into the thing, and, you know, that's it, done. All
quite interesting.
So
sounds like a Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it's very strange. And in fact, there was a very similar event on The X-Files, where that guy with the beard gets taken out the plane, the side of the plane. I want to know what happened. And I just, you know, maybe one day.
Yeah, you should get a regression done. Well, Mary could do that for you, Mary Rodwell.
Yeah, that's true. She's got a conference coming up, and we're going to chat more. We chat on Skype quite often.
Yeah, she's been on my show. I really like her. Yeah.
Yeah, she's really awesome. Yeah, she's one of those people who has her head on straight. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Very grounded, yet very in tune with children, star seeds, and what's really happening behind the scenes on a multidimensional level. And my goodness, it's a busy universe, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you know, when I talk, when I see interviews from NASA astronauts in their deathbed saying that, you know, that the universe is abundant with life, that it just makes all this, you know, makes more sense of everything that's happening. And when I look at the family history, and when I, you know, in the deathbeds confessions, you think, you know, you're able to put like a bigger picture together and discover maybe, you know, maybe it's like where, and this is one of my suppositions, I suppose, my theories towards what's going on, and I feel as though it's the same people. I don't feel as like there's different races doing it to us, to my family. Maybe they're the same. Maybe they live for longer. Maybe, you know, I feel like we're sort of like bred rats in a lab, but the lab is Earth rather, and we're not rats, we're humans. But they seem indifferent to our emotion. If we ask them to stop it, it's going to fall on deaf ears. Yeah, what ears?
Right, like they lack empathy or something.
Yeah, but they're tasked to do something. So I'm not going to stop them doing what they're tasked to do. I don't want them to get in trouble. I prefer whatever they're doing. If they were here to kill us, we'd be long gone.
Agreed.
And whatever it is they're doing, I don't think it doesn't matter. I'm not fazed by it. That's why I have no intention to stop them from doing it. But I just like to be able to open up a dialogue with them.
Right.
And say, you know, it's even though I am as compared to humans as a chimp, I would expect us to them that anything that I do or say would just be useless. But I'd love for them to, you know, just to say, you know, actually we're doing this, and we've been doing this for years, and this is, you know, like equivalent of a CIA handler. This is your guy, and he's been with your family for X, you know, 100 years or whatever. I think if that was spoken to me, you know, I'd even be more at rest with what's going on, be happier with it.
Right, explanation and clarity. Well, that's another thing too. I mean, it's really what's going on behind the scenes, you know, behind all this masquerade and all this these cases. I mean, you have to really ask yourself, why are they doing this, and what is the purpose behind it? And of course, that's something that goes real deep, I'm sure. But yeah, I think that if they wanted to take everybody out, they would have done that a long, long time ago, for sure, without a doubt. So.
Yeah. So you can only, they talk about malevolent and benevolent. All I see is that there's a duty to be performed, and they're doing it. I think if we went somewhere else, yeah, if we were them going to another planet with, I don't know, just discovering Neanderthals or something, if we had the technology to get to another planet where there were people, wouldn't we, you know, say we placed humans on the planet and left it for 1,000 years and came back. The story that would have been what's called Chinese whispers, where the story changes over time, could have evolved so much that, you know, we're the gods because of lack of understanding over time, and that we could have, they could have exaggerated some of our skills or whatever it is, or only been able to describe it in the current vocabulary. So if they'd had something where they'd lost education for a while, they'd have to rebuild it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems very similar to our own history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, there's enhancements. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Sumerian text talks about there being space people that came down and engineered us, made us to look like them, or made us in their image, and that's stated in a lot of biblical texts. Mm-hmm. But the earliest version is like the Sumerians. So if we can make a scenario for ourselves, if we were doing it where that would be plausible, why is that not then applied back to our current existence?
Right.
Making that also plausible. And to me, these questions, even though they're purely questions and speculation, and I'd like to avoid as much speculation as possible on what's actually going on. But I can't help it. When it happens, you try to make ways for it to be real or to explain how it's happening.
Exactly. Yeah. You look for the logical explanation, and then you just take it step by step up the pyramid. There's definitely a paranormal side to this whole agenda. Now, I have to ask, were you enhanced in some way psychically through your interaction?
Yeah, there's been a couple of what I call, like, there was a download, at least one download, where suddenly I was able to do things, and at one time they turned it maybe on too much, and I could hear everything, and I don't want to hear everything. I want to be selective, but it was, it's like walking up to the house, stereo and pushing the on button. And suddenly someone had dialed the knob too high. So you turn it down and you start from scratch. Okay, well, I seem to have a skill. Let's see how. And there's no book. It's like America's Greatest Superhero. That show, right? Where there's a suit and a book, but the book gets lost.
Yeah.
It's like that. So they give, the manual. There's no manual, right? And so there's a skill set. It's like a person who can run really fast through genetics is probably at some point going to discover they can do that, run faster than other people, and then they're going to probably use it. Right, so they might start, playing a sport where they can run faster, where it's required to run faster. Those kind of things come out. So if you've got a particular skill, you're more inclined to use it if you discover you've got it.
I agree.
So what you do with it, then it's up to you. If you decide to run from the police because you can run faster on foot than they can, then that's your choice. But if you decide that you're going to do personal best runs and you end up in the Olympics and you're fantastic and you're known for your running, better for you, yeah? So hoping that your moral compass is in the right spot and you're able to, you utilize it. Now, there's a lot of people that are talking about, remote viewing and being able to see the future. If you could see the future, what would you want to see? And what would you actually want to see? Because there's a difference.
Oh, absolutely.
So having precognition is tough. You can't really tell anyone. When you do, they go, like my friends, just don't tell me anymore, Dave. I don't want to know.
Do you keep a log?
I used to, but now I just abandoned it altogether. And it hasn't been anything major for a while. But the things that I've seen through my life from being a child, some of those are still to take place. So, for instance, on January 16th, and I write this in the book near the end, I was shown about 9 events, and each one of those has taken place, all 8 of them have taken place, and the last one's still to take place. But they took place in order, and they're obscure. It's like someone showing you 4 seconds clips of the future of your life, but they're significant moments that you'd know when they happened, right? When you get to that point in your life, when you see that clip, and it's happening in real life, aha, bingo, got one.
Exactly.
You don't make them happen. It's just they're entirely random. But get that they're happening. And they've all happened but one. And one is the what I'm only presuming is the same thing that the guy talking about Aldebaran, the star formation will reveal itself, as being the time at which a lot of abductees talk about this, and they talk about there being a time in which they're sort of programmed to act in a particular way, direct traffic or calm people down or,
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah, me too. So So jumping in and saying, you know what, when the opportunity to become a radio host came up, my first thought was, I want to interview abductees and I want to know more about this. And for me, the whole thing's been a personal adventure to find out what is going on.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a pattern. Wouldn't you have you noticed a pattern? Because I certainly do, insofar as a lot of these contactees, and their experiences go.
Yeah, completely. And this is what all the professionals all around the world are all stating.
Yeah, no doubt.
And they're all finding that they're all collaborating evidence from different people who are not connected to each other. And so one single event is, could be anything. Two of them, there's something, I think there might be something in this. Three of them, definite. Then you get, when you have a base of 4,500 people, you're talking about like Bud Hopkins and people like that, who say that the same people from different walks of life who don't know each other are coming up with exactly the same description of what's happening to them at nighttime. How does that make sense? And when they started to draw the data together, because remember, you've got data and then you've got information. Information is what you can get from the data. And when he started to piece together what it was, he was flabbergasted. He wasn't even interested in that line of, that field at all until he fell into it. And that's what happens to all of them, even Mary Rodwell for that matter.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, all of us. Absolutely. It's never planned. Make friends with change is what I say, because boy, does it come.
Exactly. And honestly, it's one of those things that, I think only at the time when disclosure occurs will, I think, all the abductees just relax and go, well, yeah, cool. Yeah,
but will that happen, though? That's another thing. I'm really not going to hold my breath insofar as disclosure goes. But to me, the contactees and their experiences, it sounds like a dream pool collective at this point, where they're being connected or interconnected on a different plane of existence, and then getting downloaded and whatever it is that they're meant to define and learn, and then integrated onto the earth. I don't know what your impression is of that. That's my take.
Yeah.
Sigh.
I know. I just, you know what? I just want to wait and see. I think the governments of the world are the ones who are preventing it. We know that Mexico, who else? Uruguay, most of Europe. I know Russia has done it, and England have all brought their files out and said, "Look, here you go. Here's our UFO files."
Censored, but I'm sure they're presenting some data. But how much of that is accurate?
Well, you listen to Nick Pope. Who was the guy who was originally tasked with hiding the information from the public. And then they gave him the key. And he goes, what's the key? He goes, to the real info.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, but I'm not doing that job anymore. And he goes, no, this is for you. Check it out. Nice.
Yeah.
And they showed him the room full of files which actually had the real info in it. And before then, he was a skeptic. Yeah. He was plausible deniability. He didn't know. And then now we're seeing stuff, with the advent of the smartphone, cameras, everyone's got a camera. Up until this point in time, only occasional camera, footage or anything came from anyone. But now everyone's got a video camera, everyone's got a camera. If you've got a camera and you've got a smartphone, put the instant recording video button on the homepage. So if you see something you don't have to fumble around, you're going to get a really nice long shot.
Good idea.
But also at the same time, what we're seeing is the advent of CG and computer graphics and fakery and hoaxes. And that's really hurting. I think it's hurting the genre because someone has to post something that looks particularly realistic, and then the next thing is, that was a hoax.
Exactly.
And it's sort of giving the whole genre, I suppose maybe it's a psyop or something, where they're intentionally trying to downplay that it's real, and giving that what's that something doubt? What's it called in court? Reasonable doubt.
Yeah,
reasonable doubt. So yeah, if they can induce reasonable doubt, then maybe the people who weren't going to be the fence sitters will maybe decline.
Right.
Moving into that into the belief system. So, I think the whole thing's orchestrated.
I agree. They run interference without a doubt, and whether that's deliberate or just people who are being silly. But yeah, I see that also. So yeah, you do use discernment, and you're reading through data. But when you have an experience like yours, and I mean, it's very different when you are experiencing it,
When
like
it's
a car.
personal.
Yeah.
Yep. So the image from the Los Angeles Times of the Battle of Los Angeles that occurred on February 25th, 1942, was just a photo, and there was military involved, and I was shooting at an object, and they never hit it, and it just floated back out. I think that's better than Roswell, because it happened 6 weeks after Pearl Harbor. If no one knows, just type it in, Battle of Los Angeles. And the movie Battle of Los Angeles was going down the path of reenacting the original, and they turned it with poetic license into a modern day sci-fi. But we talked to Jose Escamilla about it, because he's going to do the movie now, since no one else has really touched on it.
Oh, nice.
But the photograph that's in the paper in the LA Times shows the searchlights pointed at each other, and there's an object in the searchlights, and there's all these chaff and stuff from the anti-air guns. And it became an embarrassment for the military, saying that, well, we shoot something that's there for an hour?
Right. Exactly.
Why couldn't you shoot it? Oh, then it became a training exercise. But the people who were there still have a reunion, and they all go back to that site.
That's very interesting. And what do you think? Do you think that could have been perhaps a government craft, an experimental craft?
No.
Reverse engineering? No.
I think that was. I think that wasn't. In all truth, I think that was an alien ship just saying, you know what, you bombed. You bombed Hiroshima, yeah, just like Roswell. You bombed. We're gonna let you guys know that we're here from the same airport that the plane left, the Enola Gay left. It's where that's the closest airport to the Roswell crash, yeah. So if they knew, once again, this is my thoughts, right? My thoughts are that the whole thing's real. All of it's real. It's always been real, and we're just made to believe it isn't. And if only we can get to the truth. I've said this live on air before, and it's, if the government wants to take me aside, I'll never talk about it again. If they want to show me this stuff, I'll never talk about it again. I never will. I promise. And even after I'm dead, I won't speak a word of it.
Well, be careful what you wish for.
I know, but I want to see it for my own sanity. I want to see that it's real.
Well, I think a confirmation that kind of a confirmation would be nice, if we could just kind of take down the veil and actually show what's really happening behind the scenes. And I think everybody would be up for that one, without a doubt.
Other than that, I'm asking both sides. I'm asking the military, and I'm asking them upstairs, right? Whoever you are, come down and just honestly do it.
Great. So now there's a mothership on its way. So thanks.
Well, apparently, isn't there one that's 26 miles long that's on the other side of the moon now?
That's what I hear. Yeah.
In the not disclosure project, but the public hearing, that was brought out as information that's been gleaned from the from all accounts, from all areas, and it really is. It's one of those. The whole honestly, following it for so long and having interest in it for so long, to only continually get blocked, and I feel sorry for those people who pass away and aren't able to get the information out. The people who give deathbed confessions, especially from NASA and the military, I applaud you for doing that, because otherwise we'd still be in the dark.
I totally agree. Yeah. And when they leave, I'm sure when all is said and done, the truth is revealed when we transfer out. So, I wouldn't want to wait that long, but it would be nice to have it, all the cards on the table right now.
Yeah. It would be, well, yeah, I don't know. All I know is I just wish
that we get to the point of disclosure.
Right. Well, I think they're calibrated. The thing is that what I'm seeing today with the masses and even in mainstream is that they're being calibrated for change. They're being calibrated for communication with extraterrestrials. I mean, there's so much of that going on with science fiction, and there's such a parallel with movies that I think that people are more and more being subjected to the truth through the veil, which is their version. It's baby, small doses, basically. Baby steps into their world. But I think that is happening.
Yeah. Do you know what? And I think it's happening through Snowden. I want to bring up Snowden for a sec, yeah? Mm-hmm. I hope you don't mind.
No, not at all.
And that is that is Snowden real? It begs the question, because I don't think people have actually asked the question. Mm-hmm. We've taken at face value that this guy has taken information because there's other lawsuits against other Pentagon staff for leaking stuff to WikiLeaks. And Julian Assange is, held up, and he can't come home. He's an Aussie,
mm-hmm.
And we feel sorry for him and for his history. And if you haven't seen the movie, see it because it's got a good lot of info in it. But they do have a lot of poetic license. But the Snowden thing, right? Wouldn't that vehicle, if you're a marketing person, if you came up with the idea of being able to fabricate a person's, identity and say, you know what, let's just have a guy who escapes with all this data and release our lies, release them all. The public will forgive us.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They have. If the government just came forward and said, you know what, sorry, we've been tapping your phones. Oops, our bad, right? You would call for them to be, we gave permission for it to happen. If they just did a confession to camera, would you want to oust them and say, well, you're not fit for government, get out?
Mm-hmm.
You went against the law. The laws are this, but you authorise it. That's against the law. You don't have permission to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're out. You're gone, right? Whereas being able to have someone else confess it on your behalf, and you just go, yeah, actually, no, you got us. Yeah, we'll change it so we don't do that again, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Oops.
And I think, the big oops, our bad, right? Sorry, oops. I think that's what we're staring at here. I think the whole thing's truly fabricated.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I think that.
Interesting. Well, your intuition must be telling you something. But, to me, it just seems kind of strange also. I mean, it's highly possible you're correct on that. And it's nothing new. I mean, honestly, we've always known. I mean, anybody who studies covert intelligence understands how surveillance works and understands that you have no privacy, and especially if you're working for certain contracted areas in government. I mean, so this isn't anything that should surprise anybody across the globe. I mean, but him being the mouthpiece for that was quite interesting. And you're right. Is he real? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, he's disappeared.
I see one picture of him, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. That's it. He hasn't got on YouTube.
He's almost a character. He's like a character.
Exactly. He's like a cartoon character that they can just trot out whenever they want and say it's from him. And, and that's why I'm really a non-believer that he's real, because I heard an interview between two reporters. One was from the BBC and one was with our government channel here, our ABC. And they said, you're not going to believe what Snowden's going to release next.
And
he goes, but I can't tell you, but it's a world changer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when is that? And the other reporter said, when is that going to happen? It's all on air. He goes, when's it going to happen? He goes, well, I can't tell you that either, but it's going to happen, and it's going to be big. How does he know what Snowden's going to say?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
He's in Russia. Yeah. Certainly, the copy of the data that Snowden had on a memory stick would have been downloaded. Mm-hmm. I believe if he was really real, someone would already have a copy of that. Certainly, his ticket into Russia for safekeeping, if it was real, would be them having a copy of that data.
Right.
Yeah?
Yep.
So I think more than one person knows than Snowden, and if he's really real, then that would be the scenario. Otherwise, the whole thing's fabricated, and they're just airing all of their dirty laundry in a safe environment, using Snowden as a scapegoat.
I agree. Well, it's like a paper tiger. Once again, people chase the paper tiger. It's a distraction. I mean, what has it done? It's distracted the masses for the most part, if you ask me. I mean, a lot of this information that comes, swirling around, it's nothing new, and it's a distraction, and it just scatters people's collectives. And but I don't put much emphasis on him. I really don't, and I hope other people don't either. So it's nothing new. That's what I mean. It's just there's nothing new around that whole thing.
Do you know what? It's the same. It's the same thing where you have like someone you've always suspected it, and it's only when they tell you and you go, "Well, I sort of knew that anyway," right?
Yeah, it's like
I don't think anything's going to be a surprise. I don't think there's anything in our side of reality, which is outside of the box. Would you believe, Solaris? Right?
Oh yeah.
Where we live in our outside of the box mentality, like we broke out of the box a while ago, and we've seen a slow change of. It's crazy how people have let the stuff happen that's happened. Yeah, because we're meant to vote and vote people in and vote them out and complain when they do the wrong thing, but people haven't complained about militarizing police, about taking it away, dissolving all your rights, and I'm not going to start an argument, but we haven't complained, and it's been like that. The false analogy of a frog in boiling water, where you turn the heat up and it just dies. Well, they don't actually die. If you do it in biology, they jump out. They go, "Oh man, this water's getting hot." Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah, they jump out. They don't sit there boiling to death. But
Right.
We're doing that. We should be the analogy in another 200 years, when people are complaining about what they've got. They go, "I can't believe those people in 20 happened." They let it happen. They let all their rights dissolve away, and they become one world government, whatever it is, whatever their ultimate plan is. So. I'm sorry I went to the side on that one, but
no, you're fine.
But viewing it from our out of the box state, we have already heard all of the things that are being confessed. So unless I would dare to say that I'd put a $50 note down and bet, because we're a betting nation in Australia, I would bet that there's not going to be one word that comes out of Snowden that would surprise me.
Exactly. I agree with you on that one. What about the tall whites? Wasn't that another thing that was swirling around? And
Yep.
just a lot of hoopla, if you ask me. I mean, there's nothing, like I said, it's all been communicated in one form or another. So I think people should just assess it from a higher level of consciousness, and maybe they'll have more clarity. But yeah, I think it's designed to just skew the masses and create that paper tiger that everybody likes to chase. Without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I know we're sort of drifting all over the place.
Oh, I know, and I want to get back to what we were talking about. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
cool.
Is there something on your mind you do want to address, though?
No, I wanted
Okay.
you to ask me a question.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's just one more time. I want to talk about The Visitors, A Lifetime of Experiences, of course, which is found on Amazon.com. And make sure you pick up a copy if you haven't already. And we did talk a little bit about you are working on another book.
Yeah, I am. I think I've got the writing bug.
Excellent.
I've
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. I don't know if it's a good thing. I've decided. I've always been a big fan of sci-fi, and if there's enough time left in my life, I know my mother was a writer, by the way, too, and I've published a book after that she'd wasn't successful in getting published. I published one for her. It was her lifelong's work, and I saw that happen to my mother, and I've decided that, you know what, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to make this happen. I'm making this happen, and you know, to coin Christopher Walken, be damned if I let it happen to me, right? So, little man, you know, I'm not gonna. I can't help myself.
You're great. I love it.
So I'm writing another book now. It's a sci-fi. It's really cool, and you know, I'm writing it for me, because I point out flaws in every movie that I see. It's like, oh, I want it to be correct to physics. I want it to be correct to the law, LORE, of the genre. I want it to be something that's doesn't mix up the wrong things together and then become like false. And
I saw Gravity, the movie. It was really cool. It's not a big plug for Gravity, but it was a really cool movie.
Was it? I didn't see that.
If you haven't seen it, see it. You don't get the time back, right? There's no one crediting you the hours, but if you've been abducted, you'll know what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie itself was good. The technology was good, but they made one fatal flaw in the movie, and I want to point it out. With what you think the flaw is. Outside of that, they did all those things. They stuck to the law. They stuck to physics. Science was correct. Mechanically, everything was perfect. And if you point out some really cool movies in science fiction, you end up with Blade Runner, because it was a dirty future. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth Element,
yeah.
where once again it was a realistic version of our future. Yeah, where things aren't just all clean, and we've made mistakes, and society has, the government has, but look where we are. We're not doing too bad. Yeah. This is the same kind of thing. So I can't tell you anything about it other than that yes, it involves aliens the right way, and it's true to the current folklore that we have.
Very good. I'm looking forward to that. Well, keep us posted on that when it goes live.
I'm laughing. I had to put my head to mute. I'm laughing. I think it's fun. It's just fun.
I think that's great. Yeah, well, it's a break for me, too, because I'm actually working on a sci-fi also. We discussed that off air.
Awesome.
So, I have my other books on covert technology, spirituality, mysticism, and then I have a sci-fi, but that's a mental break for me. So, just like my children's book was a mental break for me, too. So, it's nice. And you do want to put those together and just kind of run with the energy, especially if you're, if you're running the energy for the data and it's there, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt.
It's like a tap that gets turned on for you, I think.
I agree.
That's probably the best way to explain it. And you just hope, you hope that you're sitting in front of a computer. I used to write music. A lot of radio hosts that I've met seem to be all musician types.
Mm-hmm.
Musical in some way, art or music in some way, paint or sculpt. And I did my hand at that, and I had a song that was in the top 40, but it was also outside of the top 40. It was played in rotation for a while, and I never made a cent off it. And I just said, maybe music's not for me, but I think I've got the writing bug.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a great outlet, and you can get back to it. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Well, it takes on one form or another. I mean, whether it's music or writing, poetry, it's always going to be channeled in one form or another. And that's good that you're using that as an outlet, if you ask me.
But for those listening, don't think for 1 second that what I've put in the Visitor's A Lifetime of Experiences is fiction. It's not. It's all non-fiction. It's all real. It all happened to me, and it's my account of that story. We all sit and enjoy Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all enjoy that. We know every scene from it, and I don't think my book's going to make a movie one day, but Whitley Strieber has been there and done that. I don't think there's room in the market for something like that. But if it was, if it ever came to that, I would like to them not change a word of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I don't want the genre to be destroyed with false imagery or false scenarios or whatever.
I agree.
From my experience, but like I said, my friend had a fetus that had disappeared, and I think we're in my family history, except for my mum with my sister disappearing, I don't think that we've had anything else like that. Where was I going? I was going somewhere.
You're talking about the fetus.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Do you have memory loss? Screen memory.
Yeah, that screen memory is coming. Oh, I remember last night now. No, it was. I think my friends who the friend that I was telling you about that had the fetus loss. That's right. Mm-hmm. She was devastated for two reasons on two different levels. One was for the loss of her baby, which is what every mother goes through, but the other one was, why did you take it from me?
Mm-hmm.
Because she remembers the experience. And I guess I'm thankful for not being female and having the same experience. I know that what I went through was traumatic. What I've been through is traumatic. I know that it's traumatic for those of you out there that are listening to this and having the same experiences or can relate to them. But I think the added trauma of having a baby being taken from you and then told it wasn't yours anyway, I think that's something that I think is that needs more attention in the research. It happens, and move on, talk about it. It's documented cases happening all over the place. But for whatever their intent, the alien agenda's intent, is still unknown to us. We hear all different kinds of things. Like Phil Snyder talks about them using one of our glands to get the excretion from it. I don't know how true that is. I just don't know. I've not seen anything or heard anything that would be true to that. I think that if they're just doing slow mods to our DNA, that makes sense. Maybe they're doing this en masse, or 1 in 10 people, or whatever it is to waken us up, to awaken our society, to maybe turn on some of the attributes so that we become who we're meant to be. Maybe all the technology around us has suppressed that, like the mobile phone. We have no reason to think towards our friends. I'm sure you've done it, and the listeners have done it. They've thought about their friend, they've gone to pick the phone up to ring them, and their phone is rung, or vice versa. And you said to your friend, "Oh, I was just thinking about you," and you go, "Yeah, I know, I was just thinking about you too."
Exactly. Natural telepathy.
Yeah. Maybe it's suppressed because of the technology we have around us, and we wouldn't be in this position right now if we didn't.
I agree. I think that there's a lot of dirty electricity out there that's running interference against our natural spiritual design, shall we say. So, and the 4-body system, and we're naturally charged, we're naturally psychic. So, when you have a lot of anomalies floating in and out, whether they're man-made or extraterrestrial, you're still going to have some interference here and there. I think the biggest thing we can do is really accentuate our spirituality so that we're fine-tuned to multidimensional consciousness. That's my take anyway.
Yeah, think about this. If you've ever been looking at someone that you found attractive to you, I'm not getting you in trouble if you're sitting next to your partner right now, right? So you don't have to admit anything to me or out loud. But if you were looking at someone and you thought something in your head like, wow, that person's attractive, and they turned and looked directly in your eyes, it may be in a crowd, maybe you're looking at them from a building above, from a window down at the street level, and they look directly up at you rather than anyone else in that scene. They could be surrounded by 100 people, but then yet they don't. They look directly at you and bust. I call this a bust. They bust you for looking at them. But your intent wasn't bad. Yeah, your intent is, wow, they're attractive. That is telepathy. And we can all do it. Think about all the times in your life when you've been busted looking at someone.
Yeah. People are wired for radar.
If you're a stalker, don't. Just stop doing it. But just in public spaces, and you know what, we can all do it. We've always been able to do it, and I think that it's something that, if you're out there, think about how you could best use that with your friends to communicate. Put your mobile phone down, try and maybe meditate. Maybe seek out some professionals who might be able to lead you in the right direction. Sign yourself up for one of those remote viewing classes if you've got the skill.
Exactly. And I'm a firm believer that everybody's psychic. It's just a matter of tuning in and fine-tuning the instrument we are given on so many different levels. Now, do you have past life recall?
My mother was one of the things that I don't have it personally. I didn't know what it was until she took me back. So, I was apparently around, and I say apparently because I can't physically do it, and I didn't know my name, so I can't look it up in the birth records. But not unlike that English schoolboy at 7 who said he was a fighter pilot, a bomber pilot, and his co-pilot's name was X, and his military number, like serial number, was this, and he was on this mission, and his plane crashed in this way, in this location, which were all confirmed.
Very specific, yeah.
He was 7, particularly specific, and that was confirmed. So unlike that, no. But I did invent something, and I was driving a car which I could recognize on sight in a magazine with, maybe 20 other cars. I knew exactly which one it was.
Interesting.
Outside of that, no, not really.
Mm-hmm.
Not conscious.
Okay.
But I am open. Open to the genre, and yeah, I was surrounded by that kind of stuff when I grew up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Insofar as your trauma goes, which you did receive some kind of a trauma, but what is your advice to those who have been experiencing this sort of thing and have trauma that they'd like to move through? I mean, is there something you can present to them that might help?
Yeah, if you're interested, read my life story. It can make you feel comfortable. People have emailed me after reading it and contacted me. I've had a few emails from people that have said, you know what, that's exactly what's happened to me, and thank you so much for writing this. I was crying, I was tearing. I don't even know why I was, in fear. When people read this stuff, they just start tearing. It's frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Brings back their experiences. And she said that she was so really pleased that she was able to read it. Yeah. If you seek out some stuff, and I direct you also at the Whitley Strieber Communion book.
Mm.
My mother and I stood in front of that book display, frozen like deer in headlights, and she was holding my hand so hard that I thought she was going to break bones in it.
Wow.
And I turned up to her, and her tears were streaming. She wasn't crying. Tears were streaming down her face, and so was I.
Oh my goodness.
And only when we looked at each other we realized we were both doing it. So the image itself was so powerful enough for us to recognize. And I was young, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd always talked about buying it. And only later on I bought it, read it, and gave it to her. She was too scared to buy it. Like, it was that much fear around it.
Oh my goodness.
But so what I suggest is get online. There's so much more support available to people out there right now. Read other people's accounts because it helps you. And when you feel comfortable enough, if you're lucky enough to be in an environment where there are support groups or at least UFO groups who talk about, local sightings and things, get involved. Because the more you're involved, the more you feel like you have something over it. You've got some control over it. If you can just control your emotions by understanding that you are who you are in your own skin, and that's the reason for writing my book, was so that I knew who I was. I'm comfortable in what I've experienced, and I've acknowledged to myself that they're real.
Exactly. That's so important, and I appreciate you putting that book out here. And we're getting ready to wrap this up very, very soon. But I do want to thank you, David, for being on the show this evening. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and I'm very pleased to know you as a friend, and you're just awesome. So I'm really grateful to have you here. And thank you for putting that book out. I find it to be a fascinating read.
Back at you, and it's been a pleasure being on, and just to say hello to everyone out there. And you know what? Be strong. Be strong, you'll get through it.
Exactly. And how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to contact you?
Well, via the website, the shinysideout.net. There's a contact page, and both the hosts of our show are there. I'm Dave from Shiny Side Out, so you can there's a link there. Just click it, and you can email me directly. Or if you can't, if you're only on a mobile phone right now, it's just dave@shinysideout.net.
Excellent. And just out of one quick question for you here, how many hybrids do you think we have on this planet right now, in theory?
Oh, that's a good question. Good on you. I don't know, 100,000.
Okay. Do you think that
Quite possible?
plus or minus?
I was thinking 20, but I thought that's just not right.
Mm-hmm.
The number's way too small. So my immediate thought was 20. It's probably 20,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lot. But I think there's way more.
I do too.
And if you classify, what do you count as a hybrid?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just people that have been genetically modified, or is it, are we standing next to an alien? Is there someone from not Zeta, the other one, who is standing next to in a lift that really is an alien?
Exactly. And how long has it been going on? Because it seems to me since the beginning of man-made time, we've had some kind of genetic manipulation happening here.
Yeah, completely. The Aboriginals in Australia from
Mm-hmm.
70,000 years ago talk about the beginning of mankind and how one of their Aboriginal counterparts became a shaman after being abducted by aliens and having small pebbles, they called it pebbles, put under his skin, and they would never abduct them again.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's part of the Dreamtime story.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
So, that's 72,000 years. That's the longest continuous culture on the planet. And,
they were happy doing what they were doing.
Exactly. And what do the Aboriginals do these days? I mean, are they still in tune with those celestial craft? I mean, what's happening with them?
That's unknown. I think I have to do a lot more research, and I wish I had an answer for you straight away.
That's okay. I'm just curious
It's certainly
because
something that I can go down that path.
yeah, it's such a lineage that I find to be so multiversal and so celestial that it's very, very interesting to me. And anyways, we're getting ready to wrap this up once again. Thank everybody for tuning in tonight. It's been a pleasure to have you on, David. I hope to have you back, and let me know when you get that science fiction ready to rock and roll.
Oh, you know it.
And your book one more time so people can get a hold of it is at Amazon.com. And anything else you want to add?
No, it's Visitors, A Lifetime of Experiences.
Excellent. And we'll have to have you back, too, because I do want to talk a little bit about end times or your perception of end times in the future, if there is an end time, or maybe it's a transition of a new world, and not necessarily
that's what the yearbook said, Jim.
Excellent. Hey, thank you, everyone. See you next week.